Welcome and thank you for joining us today for the future of data center network automation. My name is Raleigh Gould and I'll be the moderator for today's event. Our featured speaker is Shamus McGillicuddy, VP of Research covering network management at EMA. Shamus has more than 15 years of experience in the IT industry as an industry analyst and journalist. His research focuses on all aspects of managing enterprise networks. And before I hand things over to Shamus, I wanted the audience to know that Shamus will be concluding his presentation today by taking your questions. Feel free to log them anytime, though, using the Q&A functionality. Also, today's event is being recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email from EMA with resources from today's event, including a link to this new research report. So I hope you will check that email out. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our featured speaker, Shamus McGillicuddy. Shamus?
Thank you, Raleigh, and thank you everyone for joining us today. So today I'll be presenting results from a new multi-sponsor research project I conducted. So it's independent research funded by multiple vendors in the industry. These are the vendors that made this research possible, so I wanted to thank them all. They are all, in one way or another, playing a part in the topic we are here to discuss, which is data center network automation. So we got Glueware, IP Fabric, Juniper Networks, Nokia, Red Hat, and VMware. So thank you to those companies for helping me make this research happen. Today's agenda, I'm going to talk about what my research goals were with this project and how I conducted this research very briefly. Then we will dive into the value of data center network automation, not data center automation, which that says that's a typo there, but the value of data center network automation, why organizations are doing it, how they're benefiting from it, are they doing it well? Then I'm going to look at the strategies that organizations have for developing a solution for data center network automation. And then we will go through some of the challenges that the people who participated in our research are struggling with when they're trying to automate networks in their data centers, and some best practices that the research bubbled to the surface through the data. So first off, research goals and methodology. I wanted to understand the state of network automation in data centers today and to identify some best practices. There's a lot going on there. I had the sense that there were a lot of people who are adopting commercial products, and also a lot of people who are writing their own software, and a lot of people just writing lots and lots and lots of scripts. But the truth is, a lot of them are just doing all of that at once. Like I've talked to multiple organizations over the years who have adopted some sort of solution that automates their data center network in some way, and then had to write some software to automate part of that automation solution. So like there's networks are very complicated. Every organization has a very specific environment that doesn't completely replicate to the next. And what I've always found is that there's a lot of different approaches, and I wanted to get a sense of what is happening from a market perspective, and try to provide some guidance there to practitioners. The methodology was to survey more than 350 technology professionals who are directly involved in either or selecting, implementing, and using automation solutions. Some of them are doing all three, many of them are specializing in one, but they're all involved in some way in the technology that automates data center networks in their environment. Ended up hitting 359. I overshot my 350. And then I also conducted one-on-one interviews with more than half a dozen people in very large companies about what they're doing around this to provide some additional qualitative analysis to the data, and to provide some color. And you'll see some quotes from people that I talked to. They're all anonymous because otherwise they wouldn't have talked to me in this research presentation. So just a quick overview of demographics, kind of an eye chart here, but you'll see on the left-hand side the job titles represented. There's a lot of architects from IT and network roles, a lot of middle management people, like 15% are managers or supervisors, another 10% directors of technical teams. You see a lot of 15% were executive roles like CIOs and CTOs, and then some engineers and some automation engineers and developers. From an organizational group perspective, like a quarter of them were from a technical executive suite, IT or network. A lot of security people, a lot of architecture people and engineering people. It was a transatlantic point of view, so 60% America, 40% Europe. We focused on the UK, France, and Germany in our European survey sample. Also, lots of different kinds of organizations. So you see there 9% were cloud providers, 19% were communications or telecommunications service providers like telcos, mobile network operators, things like that. And then 72% were enterprises. So we saw some differences in places, some extreme differences in certain places. I don't highlight them here too much because we don't have a lot of time, but the full report that this presentation is based on, which is in excess of 70 pages, goes into detail throughout about where the differences lie between telcos, cloud providers, and enterprises. Among the enterprises, 25% of the overall sample were retail, wholesale, distribution. Very large representation from them. That was random. I was not targeting any specific enterprises. Finance, banking, and insurance also very well represented, as well as manufacturing, and then healthcare, medical, farm, and software there. Lots of the size of companies was also very distributed. You see a lot of very large, a lot of small enterprise, and a big chunk of people between 1,000 and 5,000 global employees. Revenue, you see more even distribution. 33% are billion-dollar plus companies. More than half are between 100 million and a billion. So some pretty big organizations, as well as some smaller ones. I allowed smaller ones in more than I usually do, just because I knew some of the, I wanted to capture some of those emerging cloud providers. That was my goal there. So value of data center network automation. Most of the organizations that we surveyed told us that they try to measure ROI with their automation efforts in the data center network. And of those, 48% expected to get an ROI on their investments in data center network automation within 2 years, which is pretty good. The rest were thinking 3 to 4 for the most part. There was like a very small number who weren't quite sure when they'd earn an ROI, but to see half the market getting an ROI within 2 years is pretty good, especially given how hard data center network automation can be. On the left, these are the business benefits that people are pursuing with their investments in automating their networks in the data center. So you see operational efficiency as a top priority, followed not too far behind by a focus on reducing overall security risk. So, improving your processes, reducing errors that lead to opening up some sort of security vulnerability through a bad configuration or something, improving the way you implement security policy. Big priority. Operational efficiency is about just making your people being capable of doing more during the day, not spending as much time on repetitive tasks, things like that. We heard that a lot when talking to people on the phone. Improve compliance, being able to set standards for your network, being able to set standards for regulatory compliance, and push that through an automated system in your network was a priority. And you see also a desire to be agile, so being able to respond to changes in the business, and then network and application resiliency, like just improving overall uptime, performance, making sure that mistakes that happen through automation, through manual processes, are eliminated through automation. Here's a couple perspectives from people I talked to for the research. So at the top, you see this network automation engineer from a $3 billion North American retailer. he talked about operational efficiency and improved agility as big things for him, and also improved quality. So he says, in the past he would see a network change would take him his enterprise 15 days to implement, and then once automation was in place, that same change takes a few minutes. Interesting quote from him I liked a lot. When an engineer has everything they need to execute a change right in front of them, it leads to high quality work with a quick turnaround time. Now, that's not going to automatically happen because you have automation in place. Because like you think, and I think this is like a big thing to think about as you're thinking about data center network automation, and network automation in general, is like when you've implemented the tool and you tell the engineer to use it, and they sit down and they open up the tool, do they have everything they need right in front of them to implement a change? If they don't, then you have some more work to do. And I'll get into that in a little bit. Um, if you're wondering what I'm getting at, it's data, network data. Like, do the tools have all the data ready at the user's disposal to implement a change easily? Not all the tools that these people are using do that. Guy in the bottom, network design engineer, $25 billion pharmaceutical company. He said he's focused on trying to reduce human error. And he was thinking back to a time when he was working in the financial industry, and one of his colleagues pushed a command to solve an issue with one of their load balancers, and the change didn't go through as expected, and it led to downtime at a major stock exchange, thinking like one of the biggest ones in the world. And that's an example of why people are trying to automate data center networks, is because they don't want to take down a global market. Solution strategies. First off, almost 74% of the organizations that we surveyed are multi-tool. Like, they're using two or more solutions for data center network automation. That's not including like all the scripts that their engineers might be writing to automate like individual tasks. This is actual tools that like orchestrate change. They have like almost 3/4 of them have more than two, or two or more, sorry. And what do you see? It's interesting. Like, both of them, like almost all of them are doing both commercial and homegrown to some extent. 93% told us that they're developing their own network automation software. We asked them why. 49% said one of their biggest drivers was security and compliance issues that required them to develop stuff in-house. 43% said the big issue was they needed functionality that was aligned to their environment. I talked to one guy at a cloud provider, said that like he had multiple topologies in his network when he was starting to automate like 6 years ago, and most of the commercial tools could only do one or two of those topologies, or mostly just one, and he wanted something that could handle everything. So he started writing stuff in-house, and now he's thinking, he looks at the market, and the market's gotten better at what he needs, but it's too late for him to turn back. So he needed functionality aligned to his environment. 34% said they need to close gaps in the tools they bought. I referenced earlier people writing software to automate something in an automation tool they bought. I talked to like several people that have done that over the years. 98% said they're using commercial tools. Why? Security and compliance requirements. It's like the flip side. Like, there's certain things where security and compliance requirements drive them to write their own software, but then there are other requirements that drive them to adopt commercial tools. It's a complex world. Imagine having to balance all of that. Fast time to value, so they want to be able to deploy the tool and just get it working. They don't want to have to like tinker with the homegrown thing for years and years and years. They want to get it out quickly. Better cross-team visibility into data, like a commercial tool might give them a better like a better console view into what's data is happening, what data is in the network, and improve like decision making and things like that, and how to automate stuff. And then breadth and depth of functionality. Commercial tools, as they mature, like just have lots of bells and whistles, and something homegrown might be just bare bones, just usually it's developed like people I talk to, like they develop it to automate one thing, and they add another feature to it, and then they add another feature to it, and it becomes pretty well featured maybe 6 years later, but at the beginning it's pretty specialized. Whereas a commercial tool gets you all those features really quickly. What are people using? We ask them, like, what kinds of tools do you have to automate data center networks? On the left-hand side, you see the chart, like majority of them are using some sort of cloud infrastructure automation tool. Um, so that points to the fact that there's a lot of alignment between public cloud and data center network automation. DevOps automation or infrastructure as code tools, like nearly half of them are using that. Not many fewer, almost comparable number are using some sort of integrated automation capabilities from their network infrastructure vendors, their hardware vendors. Then another 43% said we're using overlay software, which is kind of the opposite of integrated automation capabilities from their hardware vendors to some extent. A lot of them are using monitoring, visibility, and observability tools that have automation capabilities in it, such as, we're seeing something happening in our network. I want to push a change through my tool to fix it. Network orchestration and automation tools. We described that for the survey takers as sort of like the emergence of network automation orchestration tools that use like have like a model of the network and can do like intent-based networking and stuff like that. So you see 39% of them are using or planning to use that. And then old school network change and configuration management is also a factor here. It is the least used of the tools, but still like a significant preference, way more than far more than just a third of the market still using those. That one is like the one you probably see decline over time, whereas the others will probably continue to grow and become more relevant to a broader set of organizations. We asked a lot of questions about what other types of things they're looking for, and you see intent-based networking, the idea of being able to translate business intent, like business policy, into automated change on your network. To express something as like, I want this to be able to talk to that, and then the tool goes and says, okay, let's make these configuration changes to make that happen, and let's show it to you so you know that it's actually what's actually going to happen. And to that's it's something that people have been talking about. It's hyped to some extent, but 21% say they're using it extensively today, and 57% said they're making limited use of it today, and they're most enthusiastic about its ability to help them implement the networks. They've got a design in mind. Now they're plugging in all their devices, and they want to use intent-based networking to design, implement the network, to boot everything up and configure it and make sure it's the fabric and the data center is set up the way they want it to be set up and is going to behave the way they intend for it to operate. 86% told us that they believed a digital network twin would be useful, something that could simulate their network so that before they make a change, they can see how the network will behave once that change is implemented, so that they can understand whether they're going to break something or make something less secure, match up with intent, so a lot of them were interested in that. 78% require automation to be extensible to the public cloud. So, they want to be able to say, okay, they've obviously got some hybrid cloud architecture set up, and they want to be able to do some coordination of automation of their data center networks with whatever cloud networks they have, so that there's, so that, if they have applications that are spanning public and on-prem environments, or hosted environments, they can sort of coordinate the network policies and things like that to make sure that everything fits together properly. So lots of interest with that. They also told us that they want some integrated network assurance features. We noted earlier, a lot of them are using monitoring tools as a component of their overall data center network automation strategy, but they want data center network automation solutions that have integrated monitoring and troubleshooting capabilities. That's like the huge majority of them say that they need that. They don't just want a tool that can push configuration out from a central point. They want to see what happens when they do it. They want to see what happens when it doesn't work properly. They want to know when they need to make more changes. The top priorities for the integrated monitoring, they want to be able to see security and compliance risk on their network. So, oh, something's out of policy. Okay, now I'm seeing that in my automation tool that it's out of policy. Can my automation tool tell me how to get it back in policy? And then can I push the button or a series of buttons? Overall application and network health, an overall application and network performance. Like they want to see how things are performing from within the automation tool to some extent. And they also want to see visibility into the network device health, like so they can say, they can make some sort of automated change in response to like certain ports being overwhelmed or CPU spikes or something on some top of rack switches or something like that. Network data. 48% of the organizations in the survey say that when people are using their data center network automation tools, they have to gather at least some data manually when making a change. So they're going to like an Excel spreadsheet or some sort of like repository of configuration files, or they're checking something, IP addresses, whatever. They have to go multiple places to get data and bring it to the tool in order to have all the information they need to implement a change. And 51% of the people that have that manual data gathering in place say that it undermines the effectiveness of their tools. And here are the top three reasons, the top three things that happens as a consequence of that undermined effectiveness. One, automation takes too long. A guy needs to make a change. He has to go and consult multiple systems. Something takes a few hours when if the data was in a central source of truth in the automation solution, it could take a few minutes. Lack of change visibility and verification. So they push a change through. They can't see it happen because they don't have the ability to pull data from the network to monitor the state of the network. They only can push intent, but they can't monitor state. So they're not able to pull events and pull metrics and see like their change unfold and succeed or fail. And then some of them, the number three consequence, security vulnerabilities. Like you in the translation of the data that you've gathered manually, like something got mixed up in your head and you pushed a bad change. You've a cut and paste error, what have you. And as a consequence, security policy is violated, a vulnerability is opened up, and trouble ensues. So our take at EMA is that a source of truth that automates data collection and management is going to be essential to a successful data center network automation solution. And we found that organizations that were more effective with their overall data center network automation strategies were more likely to automate more of their data collection process when implementing and operating network automation solutions. And in terms of data on the left, we asked them what data is most important to your data center network automation. And no surprise, top of the list was configuration information, whether it's raw files or structured data. They need that data, especially if they're trying to maintain like golden configs and stuff like that. Inventory data is also very important to them. So they want to know what devices are on the network, make and model, software version, where is it, what's it connected to, things like that. And then network device metrics, that gets into state, like collecting data on what's happening with the individual devices. And network flows also gets into state, like how's data flowing as a result of my automation, what's changed, what's bad, and security policies. They want to that's the top 5 data priorities. Like, when you're changing networks, you want security context. You want to make sure that you're maintaining security policies, so you want to have that handy when you're running automation. Challenges and best practices. All right, so total success is rare with data center network automation. Only 23% of our survey takers told us that they believe that their overall strategy for automating data center networks was very, very good. A big chunk of them, like maybe more than half, I can remember it's more than half, said that pretty good. We're doing pretty good. Could do better. And then small number weren't really sure if they were doing good or bad. And then there's maybe like a handful, maybe 20, 30 of these people who classified their efforts as a failure. Um, why are they struggling? Do they feel like they could be better? We asked them like, what are your challenges with planning and evaluation of technology and strategy? What are your challenges with implementing that technology, and what are your challenges with, you know, using it? And here you see the top responses to those questions. So under planning and evaluation, they struggle with understanding how automation tools are going to interact with other systems, like other management systems, orchestration, cloud management systems, storage, things like that, because they're trying to orchestrate change across multiple domains, not just the network. You know, the data center infrastructure itself needs to be orchestrated and automated. 36% said they were struggling to project costs and set budget, especially if as you're getting into things, you're finding one tool isn't enough. You're going to have to, in addition to adopting commercial tools, maybe uh, devote some resources to writing homegrown software, or vice versa. You thought you could you could write software to solve all your problems, and you're realizing it's not enough, and you got to buy something commercial to close the gaps. And then just assessing and evaluating technology. It can be hard to get through the buzzwords. It can be hard to find the time to do like a proof of concept or to play around in some vendor lab. Finding time to figure out what technology is going to be helpful and what technology is going to sink you is hard. Around implementation, 44% said they had infrastructure issues that undermine their implementation. So, you know, maybe they have older hardware that doesn't have any APIs, so they got to implement solutions that can talk to CLI and like send scripted changes to the CLI. Or maybe they have, and that can be complicated because a lot of them have like multiple software versions from the same vendor. You know, they're running, like maybe they have like one OS running on their top of rack switches, another OS running on their aggregation and core switches, and another OS running on their router. And all of those have subtle syntax differences when you're interacting with a command line interface. And so making sure your tool can talk to each one of those properly can really muck things up. And then maybe you got more modern equipment where there are APIs available, make things simpler, but maybe those APIs aren't very good. Maybe they don't open up as much functionality as you need for programmability. Maybe they aren't well documented, or maybe they're out of date, so you're having trouble with that. Another 44% said they're struggling to integrate and contextualize their automation with overall application service delivery. Kind of harkens back to the top issue of planning and valuation challenges. As they're implementing the tool, they're trying to make sure it's going to play with the tools that like DevOps are using, or Cloud Ops, or you know, the hypervisor team, whatever, because you want everything to play nicely together so that you can, you know, be agile and push change throughout the infrastructure, not just the network. And you want to be able to see how the changes you implement through network automation impact applications and services and things like that. And then testing and validating the implementation is a challenge for a big chunk of them as well. And then on the right-hand side, you see data problems. So they're having issues with data quality, data authority. That kind of gets back to, you know, when you're using a tool, you have to manually gather the data. If the data is in multiple places, there might be conflicts between those different places, you know, like Maybe there's some overlap. There's an issue with authority, like where's the authoritative source of data for all the IP addresses that are allocated? What's my authoritative source of data for my configurations? Like maybe it lives in multiple places. Um, Understanding impact on app behavior and performance. Guys really nervous about pushing a button because he thinks it's gonna take down their e-commerce site or something. Software bugs and stability. They've either bought tools or developed tools that just have lots of bugs, crash, whatever. They're struggling there. And then user adoption and trust. So a lot of network engineers who prefer to interact with the CLI. Do manual changes. That's their skill set. That's what they've been doing for 20 years, and they don't want to use this tool because they don't trust it and they think they know better. So that's an issue. Here's some perspectives from people I talked to. Network design engineer with a very large pharmaceutical company said, it's not an overnight thing. You need time to learn scripting, coding, to get used to it. Leadership needs to provide that hands-on experience like in a lab. And actually, we found that's actually best practice. Get lab access to tools for users, for implementers. Network engineer with a large medical research company said that he's using one vendor for everything, but there are other systems we could be using. We need better tools to do more advanced automation. We need to be open-minded to other vendors and tools. So he's realizing that his tool set's too narrow. He's recognizing that he needs to adopt an additional solution. Whether he writes that or buys it is another question. And then a network architect with a very large consulting company says that his team gets so busy with operations and deployments and outages and software upgrades that automation keeps getting pushed back. Like he has the budget to implement automation tools, but he doesn't have a group dedicated to get it done. So you need the space to do this. You need to dedicate resources to it. You can't just buy something. You got to implement it. You got to train people on it. You need to make sure that you're taking sort of like a customer success approach to your data center network automation strategy. So, and speaking of success, here's some best practices that the research found. When we looked at those best-in-class people who said they're doing really well, these are some things that we saw that they're doing. They told us that their executive technology leadership should be setting policies that encourage people to use the automation once it's in place. You got to use it. You can't keep going around these controls we put in place. If you continue to do manual changes on our network, you're going to get punished. Maybe not fired because it would be hard to replace you, but we're definitely going to slap your hand. And maybe we'll pay you a bonus if you make so many changes per year through this tool. Also, this best-in-class organization said that their CIOs tended to encourage working with new vendors. So not just those strategic vendors that you've been working with forever, but new ones that maybe you don't trust or know very well. I talked to one guy recently. He told me that it's really hard for his company, which has like 1,000 sites with thousands of routers and tens of thousands of employees and lots of automated production facilities, to bring a startup into his network because he's worried that that startup might go away in 2 years. It might go out of business or get bought, and what happens to him? And my response to him is, if it gets bought, I'm sure a company of your size will be treated very nicely. But yeah, okay. So if they did go bankrupt, then you might have an issue. But there's a recognition amongst these best-in-class organizations that there are vendors out there that do certain things very well that the vendors that you've been relying on for decades don't do well, So you got to be willing to try new technology and work with new vendors and establish those relationships and tell those vendors what your business requirements are to see if they match up with what you need, and make sure they're telling you the truth. Use open source tools and technologies when developing software in-house. We found that best-in-class organizations that were writing their own software leaned heavily on open source technology where possible. They're using things like Napalm and NetMiko from like Python libraries, using Python a lot. They're using a lot of DevOps open source tools. They were using, telcos tended to be using Open Daylight kind of frequently, even though you haven't really heard about Open Daylight recently. Uh, there was a lot of interest in the Yang data modeling language as a technology, an open source technology to use in their software. Um, Lots of other stuff. There's some emerging things too, like Batfish, if you've heard of that, was something that was not very common, but there's some that are using it, even though it's pretty new. So look for open source tools to help you develop high quality software if you're actually writing stuff in-house. Look for opportunities to consolidate. I talked about how so many of these people are using multiple tools to automate data center networks. Well, the ones that are best in class told us that they want to use fewer tools. Maybe they're not doing it yet, but they have a desire to consolidate when possible. So maybe they've written some monster piece of homegrown software that they've been adding stuff to for 6 years, and they've recognized that there's some commercial stuff out there that can do certain things better than what they can develop in house, so they buy that. And then like it becomes a question of how long am I going to maintain this homegrown stuff? Am I going to adopt more features and functionality from this commercial tool, and retire this software that I wrote in house, that costs a lot to maintain because the people who know how to maintain it are fewer and further between than they used to be, as people retire or move on to other jobs. So consolidate when possible. That's what they say. Best in class organizations are looking for solutions that can not just automate the data center network, but automate end-to-end networking. The local area network, the wide area network, out to the cloud networks you're building. Best in class organizations also are more likely to be doing something with intent-based networking today. So it's not just a buzzword, like they're using it, and they're more successful with it. Best in class organizations also told us that they are more likely to require integrated network assurance capabilities in their automation software. So they want that visibility into state of the network and how the intent they push into the network generates changes in network state. And they can react to events quickly through automation. They're much more likely to say they want their data center network automation solutions to be extensible to the public cloud. So not just automating how you're connecting into the cloud, but automating what's happening in the cloud, or at least having some sort of similar framework for how things in the cloud are automated versus how things in your data center are automated. The ability to push policies to both environments, for instance. Embrace AI ops. They are much more likely to say that they're looking for AI ops features from their data center network automation vendors. And they look at this as a way to improve overall ease of use of tools, but also improve how they manage network data associated with their automation solutions. So they think that AI ops can help them with that. And then they're much more likely to say that they're integrating their data center network automation tools with their DevOps tool chain. So they have DevOps organizations that maintain their own tool sets, but they're driving integration between the DevOps tools and the data center network automation tools. So those are some best practices. There are more in the full report that you can look at if you want to download it or get a summary from one of the sponsors of this research. They all have distribution rights to a summary of the research. So that is it for my presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Raleigh to facilitate Q&A.
Great. Thank you, Shamus. I will be sending information about the report in the follow-up emails, so I hope you'll check that out. Now let's go ahead and jump into the questions. The first one, Shamus, is when companies develop their own automation software, do they use open source components?
Oh, yeah, I kind of covered that already. But yeah, 84% told us that they're using open source. Yeah, the most popular open source technology was like those libraries like Napalm, NetMiko, and Python. Many of them were also using some kind of agent-based open source orchestration tool like Puppet, Chef, SaltStack. OpenConfig and the Yang data modeling language are also quite popular. Around 3 and 10 were using that. Netbox and Ansible, the open source Ansible technology, about a quarter were using that. And then 20 Open Daylight was on the list of things that we surveyed them about. Just I was curious to see if anyone still had that in the environments, and it's pretty uncommon, but the telcos were more likely, like more than a quarter of telcos were using it, I think. So yeah.
Thanks for those insights. The next question is, configuration data is important to automation tools. How are people storing it? Raw files?
Okay. Most of them told us that they had like a combination of both raw files and structured data that they were applying to automation. So I think it depends on some things like what they're automating, like what kinds of network technology they're automating, what vendors they have. Like in some cases, they're able to turn that into structured data in the automation solutions they have, but maybe they're automating some other things with a different tool that can't convert configuration information into structured data, so they're relying on raw configuration files. So this kind of points to the fact that most of them are using 2 or more tools, and some of those tools require and can create structured data, and others are only able to consume raw file configuration files.
Thank you. Let's take one final question. It is, what should a CIO do to encourage better automation?
Okay. Our research participants said that the biggest thing that the research participants want from CIOs and CTOs is to enforce those policies I talked about, like requiring people to use this stuff. That was like the biggest response to like, what do your leaders need to do to make this work? And as I mentioned, it was a best in class preference, like the best practice. It emerged as a best practice. Like people were really pushing for that. Like, don't let this stuff sit on the shelf. Another thing that a large number of them were saying was we need to train people, whether it's training on how to develop automation software or how to implement automation software or how to use it. This needs to be a focus, not just, you can't, automation may make things easier, but that doesn't mean that you can just give the tool to the operations team and they're going to know how to use it. Like, it's going to require some training for them to integrate it into their processes. Also, they really wanted more hands-on experience with technology through things like labs and proofs of concept. So like CIOs and CTOs, they need to, when vendors come to them and say, hey, we got this great stuff, like one of the first things out of your mouth has to be like, great, put in, how do I get it into the hands of my people so they can figure out if it works? Don't just say, all right, okay, this sounds great, let's buy it. You're going to say, I want to try it. So that's a big one. And then, as I mentioned, another best in class thing was like, be open to working with new vendors. Like that's something that the more successful organizations were doing, was saying, hey, we gotta work with some of these startups because our incumbent vendors do these things really well, but these startups are doing this, and I think we need both. So that's another thing that you should be thinking of as a CIO.
Really great insights, Shamus. Thanks for sharing those. And I wanted to thank the audience for taking time out of your schedule to join us today. I hope you'll learn more about this new research by checking out the full report. You will be receiving a follow-up email later this afternoon with the on-demand playback and additional information about this new research. Thank you again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.